Chapter 2. From Hunting, Gathering to Growing Food. The earliest people. Why were they on the move? We know about people who lived in the subcontinent as early as 2 million years ago. Today, we describe them as hunter gatherers. The name comes from the way in which they got their food. Generally, they hunted wild animals, caught fish and birds, gathered fruits, roots, nuts, seeds, leaves, stalks, and eggs. Hunter gatherers moved from place to place. There are many reasons for this. First, if they had to stay at one place for a long time, they would have eaten up all the available plants and animal resources. Therefore, they would have had to go elsewhere in search of food. Second, animals move from place to place, either in search of small prey or, in the case of the deer and the wild cattle, in search of grass and leaves. That is why those who hunted them had to follow their movement. Third, plants and trees bear fruit in different seasons, so people may have moved from season to season in search of different kinds of plants. Fourth, people, plants, and animals need water to survive. Water is found in lakes, streams, and rivers. While many rivers and lakes are perennial with water throughout the year, others are seasonal. People living on their banks would have had to go in search of water during the dry season, winter and summer. How do we know about these people? Archaeologists have found some of the things hunter-gatherers made and used. It is likely that people made and used the tools of stones, woods, and bone, of which stone tools have survived best. Some of these stone tools were used to cut the meat and the bone, scar the bark from trees, and hide animal skins, chop fruit and roots. Some may have been attached to handles of bones and wood to make spears and arrows for hunting. Other tools were used to chop wood, which was used as firewood. Wood was also used to make huts and tools. Choosing a place to live in. Look at map 2 below. All the places marked with the red triangles are the site from which archaeologists have found evidence of hunter-gatherers. Hunter-gatherers live in many more places. Only some are shown on the map. Many sites were located near sources of water, such as rivers and lakes. As stone tools were important, people tried to find places where good quality stones was easily available. Rock painting and what they tell us. A painting from the rock shelter describes the painting. Many of the caves in which these early people lived have painting on the walls. Some of the best examples are from Madhya Pradesh and southern Uttar Pradesh. These paintings show wild animals, drawn with a great accuracy and skill. Sites. Sites are the places where the remains of things, tools, pots, buildings were found. These were made, used, and left behind by the people. These may be found on the surface of the earth, buried under the earth, or sometime even under the water. You will learn more about different sites in later chapter. Finding out about fire. Fire. Find the Kurnool caves on map 2, page 13. Traces of ash have been found here. They suggest that people were familiar with the use of the fire. Fire could have been used for many things, as a source of light, to roast meat, and to scare away animals. What do we use fire for today? Names and dates. Archaeologists have given lengthy names for the times that we are studying. They call the earliest period the Paleolithic. Paleolithic. This comes from two Greek words. Paleo means old and lithos means stone. The name points to the importance to find the stone tools. The Paleolithic period extends from 2 million years ago to about 12,000 years ago. This long stretch of time is divided into the lower, middle, and upper Paleolithic. This long span of the time covers 99% of human history. The period when we find environmental changes beginning about 12,000 years ago till about 10,000 years ago is called as Mesolithic Middle Stone. Stone tools found during this period are generally tiny and are called as microliths. Microliths were probably stuck onto the handles of the bones or woods to make the tools such as the saw and the sickles. At the same time, older varieties of the tools continue to be in use. The next stage from about 10,000 years ago is known as Neolithic. What do you think the term Neolithic means? We have also mentioned the names of some places. You will find the names of many more places in the later chapter. Very often, we use the present day names of the places where people lived in the past because we do not know what they call them. A changing environment. Around 12,000 years ago, there were major changes in the climate of the world, with a shift to relatively warm conditions. In many areas, this led to the development of grasslands. This in turn led to the increase in the number of the deers, antelopes, goat, sheep, and cattle, that is, animals that survived on the grass. Those who hunted these animals now followed them, learning about their food habits and their breeding seasons. It is likely that this helped people to start thinking about herding and rearing these animals themselves. Fishing also became important. The beginning of farming and herding. This was also a time when several grain-bearing grasses, including wheat, barley, and rice, grew naturally in different parts of the subcontinent. Men, women, and children probably collected these grains as food and learned where they grew and when they ripened. This may have led them to think about growing plants on their own. In this way, people became farmers. People could also attract and then tame animals by leaving food for them near their shelters. The first animal to be tamed was the wild ancestor of the dog. Later, people encouraged animals that were relatively gentle to come near the camp where they lived. These animals, such as the sheep, goat, cattle, and also the pig, lived in the herds, and most of them ate grass. Often, people protected these animals from the attacks by other wild animals. This is how they became the herders. Can you think of any reason why dog was perhaps the first animal to be tamed? Domestication is the name given to the process in which the people grow plants and look after animals. Very often, plants and animals that are tended by people became different from the wild plants and animals. This is because people select plants and animals for domestication. For example, they select those plants and animals that are not prone to disease. They also select plants that yield large size grain and have a strong stalk, capable of bearing the weight of the ripe grain. Seeds from the selected plants are preserved and sown to ensure that new plant and seeds will have the same qualities. Amongst animals, those that are relatively gentle are selected for breeding. As a result, gradually domesticated animals and plants became different from the wild animals and plants. For example, the teeth and the horns of wild animals are usually much larger than those of domesticated animals. Look at these two sets of teeth. Which do you think belong to a wild pig and which to a domesticated one? Domestication was a gradual process that took in many parts of the world. It began about 12,000 years ago. Virtually all plants and animals produce that we use as food in the result of domestication. Some of the earliest plants to be domesticated were wheat and the barley. The earliest domesticated animals include sheep and goat. A new way of life. If you plant a seed, you will notice that it takes some time to grow. This may be for several days, weeks, months, and in some cases, years. When people began growing plants, it meant that they had to stay in the same place for a long time, looking after the plant, watering and weeding, driving away the animals and birds, till the grain ripened, and then the grain had to be used carefully As the grain had to be stored for both food and seed, people had to think the ways of storing it. In many areas, they began making large clay pots and wove baskets or dug pits into the ground. Do you think hunter gatherers would have made and used pots? Give reason for your answer. Storing animals. Animal multiply naturally. Besides, if they are looked after carefully, they provide milk, which is an important source of food, and meat whenever required. In other words, animals that are reared can be used as a store of food. Apart from food, what are the other things that could have been obtained from animals? What are the animals used for today? Finding about Finding out about the first farmer and the herders. Turn to match Turn to map 2, page 13. You will notice a number of a blue square. Each marks a site from where archaeologists have found evidence of early farmers and herders. These are found all over the subcontinent. Some of the most important ones are the northwest in present-day Kashmir and in East and South India. To find out whether these sites are settlements of farmers and herders, scientists study evidence of the plants and animals' bones. One of the most exciting finds includes remains of the burnt grain. They may have been burnt accidentally or on a purpose. Scientists can identify these grains, and so we know that the number of the crops were grown in different parts of subcontinent. They can also identify the bones of different animals towards the settled life. Archaeologists have found traces of huts or houses. At some site, for instance, in Burzahom in present-day Kashmir, people built pit houses, which were dug into the ground with steps leading into them. These may have provided shelter in cold weather. Archaeologists have also found cooking hearths both inside and outside the hut, which suggests that depending on the weather, people could cook food either indoors or outdoors. Draw a pit house. Stone tools have been found from many sites as well. Many of these are different from the earlier Paleolithic tools, and that is why they are called Neolithic. These include tools that were polished to give fine cutting edges, and mortars and pestles used for grinding grains and other plant produce. Mortars and pestles are used for grinding grains even today, several thousand years later. At the same time, tools of Paleolithic types continued to made and use. And remember, some tools were also made up of bones. Many kind of earthen pots have been found. These are sometimes decorated and were used for people began using pots for cooking food, especially grains like wheat and lentils, that now became an important part of the diet. Besides, they began to weaving clothes using different kinds of materials, for example, cotton, that could now be grown. Did things change everywhere and all at once? Not quite. In many areas, men and women still continue to hunt and gather food, and elsewhere, people adopted farming and herding slowly over several thousand years. Besides, in some cases, people try to combine these activities doing different things during different seasons. A closer look. Lying and dying in Mehrgarh. Find Mehrgarh on map 2, page 30. The site is located on a fertile plain near the Bolan Pass, which is one of the most important routes into the Iran. Mehergarh was probably one of the places where people learned to grow barley and wheat and rear sheep and goats for the first time in this area. It was one of the earliest villages that we know about. At this site, many animal bones were found. Bones of wild animals such as the deer and the pigs are also bones of the sheep and the goats were found. Other finds at the Mehergarh include remains of the squares or the rectangular houses. Each house had four or more compartments, some of which may have been used for the storage. When people die, their relatives and friends generally pay respect to them. People look after them, perhaps in a belief that there is some form of a life after death. Burial is one such arrangement. Several burial sites have been found at Mehergarh. In one instance, the dead person was buried with goats, which were probably meant to serve as a food in the next world. Elsewhere, cave painting in France. Find France in your atlas. The painting below it from the Cave of France. The site was discovered by four school children more than 100 years ago. Paintings like this were made between 20,000 to and 10,000 years ago. Many of these were the animals, such as the wild horses, oroches, an older wild form of cattle, bison, woolly rhinoceros, reindeer, and bear, painted in bright colors. These colors were made from the minerals like ochre, ochre, and or iron ore and charcoal. It is possible that these paintings were done on ceremonial occasions, or perhaps they were made for a special ritual performed by the hunters before they went for the search of a prey. Can you think of any reason? Elsewhere, a Neolithic site. Find Turkey in your atlas, one of the most famous Neolithic sites. Catalhuek was found in Turkey. Several things were brought from the great distance: flint from Syria, cowries from Red Sea, shells from Mediterranean Sea, and used in settlements. Remember, there were no carts. Most things would have been carried on the backs of the pack animals, such as the cattle, or by the people. What do you think cowries and shells would have been used for? Thank you so much. Please like, share, and subscribe my channel. Thank you.